so, because he really recognizes at the end he loses everything, and he should have been more like open to other people's input instead of just saying, nope, we're gonna just, this is what I'm gonna do. I don't care about anything else. I'm right and everyone else is wrong. And arguably, I'd say he suffers a worse consequence than Oedipus does, because Oedipus, mutilates himself, but it's like I guess it's his choice really. He's just like so distraught that he's like, I'm gonna do this, and Creon loses like everybody that he loves, and then he realizes like, wow, what I did was really stupid. I feel a lot of sympathy for him at the end of the play. I don't know. It's just interesting how your opinions change from the beginning to the end. But I didn't feel that as much when I read Oedipus.
Yeah, Ramis.
And also, I thought like sort of from a moral sense, like it was kind of, I thought like, again, Creon like messed up. But at the end, he did try to fix it. Like, I mean, I can't imagine from the time of him having her locked into the like cave, whatever it is, to him going, oh crap, let's like get her out. Couldn't have been more than, in my mind, a few hours. And so like, I think that makes it even harsher. Like, Oedipus had this, like, it was like a decades long, at least in my mind, like ordeal that had played out. But, Creon, like, he really made a, like, hamartia, and that, like, it was just one decision that, wasn't seen all right for a few hours, and he got hit with it really hard. Kind of like in Bacchae, like, it's really screwed over if you're just like.
Other questions or observations? Yeah, Drew.
From the other side of that, I've had a few hours where like I wasn't making the best choices, but it wasn't like I'm locking my niece in a cave. Like I'm gonna execute my niece for trying to bury her brother. Like that, I don't know, that kind of breaches into the realm of like you were malignantly inept. If that was your final decision, when everyone's like, hey, maybe you shouldn't lock your niece in a cave. But if you lock someone in a cave, that's the outcome, is them dying. She's not gonna start like a cave civilization.
Yeah.
She's gonna die within like 36 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also thought, like, I guess, like, in terms of question, like, the dynamic between, let me read his name, Haemon, and Creon. So, like, I'm familiar with, like, the Roman thing where, like, the father has, like, complete dominion over his children. And so, as I was reading this, I was like, I would expect everyone to be like, whoa, how is, like, this son talking back to his father? Because there's, like, some pretty spicy dialogue in there. And so I was wondering, like, is that sort of, like, power of a father, like, was it recognized in ancient Greece, or was it different?
Good question. There was not the same, the pater familias and the ius necus vitaeque, the right of life and death that a father had in the Roman culture did not apply in the Greek culture. We also, I think, see from the perspective of traditional narratives that the tension between generations is quite significant and strong. I mean, the whole system of the Olympian gods is one of generational strife, right? And so that's very much a part of Greek culture, both in its mythic landscape as well as in its historical perspective. I mean, Alexander, might well have engineered the assassination of his father, Philip II. right? Because he was anxious to make his mark and to take over. So I do think that there is, it also, I think it also reflects to a certain extent on an Athenian, from an Athenian standpoint, this, the concept of free speech, which is something that we, of course, have inherited in our culture as well, the notion that a citizen, that someone should be able to express himself in the agora, in the marketplace, in the ecclesia, in the assembly, that there is this notion of free exchange and free speech. Paresia is the name of the Greek concept. So that's very much built into this, and it's not, so the Romans clearly had a much more strict sense of social strata and the elites versus the masses, and we see here a manifestation, I think, of the really, to a certain extent, I think, radical democratic ideals of Athens. That, yeah, I mean, a son can speak to a father in the same way that anyone can speak to the assembled group, and so we do have kind of it's an interesting generational issue here, because the chorus is made up presumably of elders. Okay, these are older people, and they are certainly citing. They think that Hymen makes a lot of sense. They are. I think they are a thing. So I think that's an important thing to bring out, is that we see this is something. I do think, just on a personal note, that when we read Greek tragedies and when we read the speeches and the histories of Greeks, I think that we feel a certain kinship to this society, to this people, because of things like this, the freedom of expression, the notion of intergenerational struggle, and sons talking back to their fathers and fathers trying to correct their sons and all of that sort of thing, that we feel a certain kindred spirit. And I think it's partly because we have inherited so many of the social conventions of the Greeks, including democracy, free speech. I think these are all interesting observations, and they are definitely different from the Romans.
So even a Greek audience viewing this, their sort of focus wouldn't be this guy's crazy talking out to his father. It would be look at how great of a citizen he is, challenging the false authorities.
Oh, I think very much so. I think you've identified the fact that Creon's behavior is excessive, and the society feels this. I mean, obviously, Antigone feels this deeply, all right. But also the entire society seems to feel this way, and Creon really is acting as a tyrannos to a certain extent, and that the Greeks would have recognized that, my way or no way kind of thing. So I think that's an important observation. But I want us to explore really why, because I think Drew raises a really interesting question here. Why is he reacting so strongly? What has happened here that can we account for the extreme nature of Creon's behavior? And I think that's a really important question. Let me just, as a footnote, say, and I want to raise this as a question for our discussion, is that, as you know, we're not sure about the time of production of almost all of Sophocles' plays, with some exceptions. We know that Oedipus at Colonus was the last play that was produced posthumously. We do have a firm date for Philoctetes, which is 409 BCE. But the others we don't know, and most scholars believe that Antigone may be one of the earliest of the ones that had survived, and it may have been related to the role that Sophocles then plays in the Greek city-state, being elected, for example, as a strategos for the state. So I just want us to think for a second and consider that this might be one of his earliest attempts, and maybe we see an evolution of his skill as a playwright over time. Because Oedipus would be the next one that he wrote and was produced, and then Oedipus at Colonus. Do we see an evolution in his skill as a playwright? Is Antigone a little, maybe not quite as refined and as nuanced as some of the other plays are? So let's come back to Drew's observation about this scene's, what is going on with Creon here, and can we account, what is it that we might account for this? I'll just have this little anecdote. A friend and a mentor of mine, we were on the panel at one point talking about Antigone, and he says, you know, all growing up, I've read Antigone many, many, many times, and all growing up, in my youth and in my early years as an academic, I always felt that Antigone was a tragedy about Antigone. She says, now as I get older, I realize that it's the tragedy of Creon. It's not about Antigone, it's Creon. And I've always really appreciated, bless you. That's a good omen, Elijah. Thank you very much. That's just what we needed at this moment. I've always appreciated that standpoint, that Creon, trying to really understand Creon. I think we can all understand Antigone for a variety of reasons, and I want to talk more. I want us to discuss that, but let's talk about Creon. What's going on here? What do you think?
I thought maybe like he was in a similar state to Pentheus, because he makes he tries to uphold we're gonna honor the defender of Thebes and we're not gonna honor the traitor of Thebes. Like that's sort of his line. And I think he carries out that to an extreme and to a fault, where he's trying to be super civic and about the polis, which is great and all until it leads him to disobey the divine law. And so I think where he's coming from is he's trying to do his civic duty to honor those who deserve honor and disgrace those who in his mind deserve disgrace. And I think that's what he's coming from.
Okay.
Kind of going off that actually, the Pentheus theme, I think it's page, I can't remember. It's when the chorus comes in for the first time, and they are describing what the current state of Thebes.
Yes.
And they go through the battle. Oh yeah, it's line 154. Yeah, or 53. Line 153.
Still on.
And they say that on page 53. Yeah. They say we must now be ruled by Bacchus, and this is right after Dionysus and Eteocles kill each other. So it's almost as if they're predicting the chaos that's going to ensue, and they realize that dark times are upon their city.
Is really, that's a really important line there, okay? And that certainly speaks to Rames's point that maybe we've got a little Pentheus thing going on here, that Dionysus is so what has just happened at Thebes?
So we left off last time with Oedipus in Colonus.
Yep.
And so when Oedipus was in Colonus, we learned that Polynices and Eteocles had a falling out. And now, when we're in Colonus, Oedipus is in Colonus, Eteocles is in the city ruling, and Polynices has come to Oedipus to beg for an army. And so presumably Polynices has gathered his army in Athens. And
In Argos.
Oh,
in Argos.
Argos.
So he's coming from Argos, right?
Right, so he's gathered his army that Oedipus didn't give him, and he's gone back to Thebes and fought this battle with Eteocles, where apparently the gods did a bunch of stuff, and both of the brothers died on each other's swords. And now Creon, as the uncle of the princes, has assumed rule, and he's decided that Eteocles was defending the city from the other brother who was attacking.
Okay, so we've had a civil war, right? Okay, so we've had a civil war. People have died, right? A foreign army has attacked Thebes. has not been successful, but we've got a civil war, right? And so essentially we have a situation that Creon, that we might even think of this as a moment when martial law is operating, right? Because we've had a conflict, we've had an attempt to overthrow the city, right? Those are pretty drastic circumstances, right? Those kind of events don't happen very often, and they call, I think, understandably, for some fairly severe actions, right? To try to set the ship of state, right? And I hope you picked up on the naval imagery in here that we see, and this was very common in the Greek world, that they really thought of themselves in these nautical terms about the ship and as being upright and battered by storms and so on, and having a person at the helm. All of these sort of metaphors from the nautical world were certainly germane to the Athenians in particular. So we've had a civil war, and Creon has made a declaration about who should be honored and who should be dishonored, as it were. Right? What do you think about that?
I guess you could think about, like, in our Civil War, like, I think that nowadays we have like the American Civil War. Like, we have a similar predicament, I think, between, like, who do we honor and who do we not. So,
Yes, absolutely, right? Okay, the victors get to decide who gets honored and who doesn't get honored, right? And and I do think you're absolutely right that we are now facing a situation where people have honored some that were on the losing side, right? And not necessarily, and I think actually quite dramatically, not in sort of conformity to the broader feelings of society. I think this is a very, I mean, I read this play today, and I see absolutely things playing out in this is a repeat, okay, if you will, of things that are happening to us right now in our culture, right? Yeah, go ahead, Drew.
I see a small distinction there between the American Civil War and the Theban one, because the U.S. Civil War, like, erecting a monument to Robert E. Lee isn't just like giving a dead person the respect that a dead person requires, which is just burying them. It is monumenting, like, their life and what they stood for, compared to, I think, like, Antigone's not trying to glorify the traitor of Thebes. She's just trying to bury her brother, which I see as different. Just burying someone compared to, like, actively venerating their legacy.
like, as a brother, not like as a soldier.
Yeah, she's not like, I'm burying the traitor of Thebes, the soldier. I just want to bury my brother, compared to, like.
Well, I think that's a very important nuanced view of things. Absolutely, absolutely. We're talking about essentially basic human decency here, right? The thing that we would afford everyone that we see operating, and I do think that some reflection about the other traditional narratives associated with death are important. I mean, for example, from the Iliad, you know, how important it is to recover the body, how important it is, and how Achilles refusing to bury or to give Hector, to show Hector's body the right, you know, appropriate respect, okay, inflames the gods. I mean, Antigone is speaking, look, if we look at the Iliad and we look at what Achilles did to Hector, and we see that the gods were terribly disturbed by this, we should see in that a lesson for our own behavior. So I do think that in terms of their traditional narratives, that this was a big deal, and providing the dead with their you know, their due rights is important. But let's think about this from a longer, you know, in terms of the struggle between these families and the relationship between Creon and the family of Oedipus, and see if we can tease out some of the things that were going on. So we've established the fact that we've got tantamount to a martial law situation. There's been a civil war. Creon has taken control of the city, and because the two brothers killed each other on the battlefield, Creon is feels compelled to establish a sense of law and order, a sense of order in the city-state. And he reacts very strong, but it goes well beyond that in his attitude to Antigone. So what's going on with him, and can we account for this? What has happened? You know, we've seen Oedipus the king, and we've seen Oedipus and Colonus. What has happened between these things that might help us understand what's happening with Creon? Davis, yeah.
Well, part of it is actually really out of character for Creon, because he doesn't like consult with the gods really, which was a big deal for him at the end of Oedipus. So now he's really like in Oedipus's shoes when he's faced with this problem, but he thinks like he has the answer already, and so he's just gonna like run with it, and he doesn't need counsel in his mind, and it's obviously just like the wrong thing to do. But yeah, I feel like Creon in Oedipus Tyrannus would have been like, I should consult like a seer. I should figure out from the gods what I'm supposed to do, like I did when I banished Oedipus. But I think now that he's in charge, and like his family is kind of in ruin basically, because Oedipus is gone, but he was disgraced, and his sister's dead. His nephews killed each other. I think he's just like confused as to what to do, but since he has this one thought of like, well, I need to honor one and kind of disgrace the other, like, I'm just gonna do that. So he has no insight whatsoever, and I can't say why, except for fear, I guess, or like, just, yeah, distress at like what his family is becoming. But it's ironic because his decision literally just ruins his family even more. Like, I mean, how many people are dead now? After everybody dies at the end of this play, there's like, yeah, no, like how many? What's the number? It's like 6 or something people are dead, or, I mean, at the very least, like completely destroyed now.
Pretty much, it's like just Ismene.
Yeah, exactly. So there's he has one niece, and that's it. Like, man, that really sucks.
Elijah has some, yeah.
I definitely agree that it was some type of fear of like whether to choose family or the city. He's the leader now. He tries to do what's right, but also I found it also more like David, it's very ironic that he didn't consult the gods. Even Tiresias advised against it, and he didn't listen to him, even though in the order from the chronological order of the plays, even though this one came first, we do know that Tiresias is the same person that talked to Oedipus, and Oedipus didn't believe him. And even the chorus was reminded Creon that Tiresias is pretty much always right. And he was like, I'm not going to listen to you either at first. Of course, he didn't change his mind in the end. But for me looking at this, especially with his character in the previous plays, yes, it is a hard decision, but I don't see why you would potentially put your family in even more danger for the city, even though you're going against family and your family has already had all these deaths already that happened, and you're potentially said, as a matter of fact, not even potentially, he literally said that, hey, I'm going to have Antigone die as well. So you're just killing more family members instead of, supporting them. Because I understand the thing of trying to support the city, but you also have to have some type of decency that says this is Antigone's brother that we're talking about. It's not just some random person, and they only want to bury them. They're not trying to, like said earlier, trying to like support them as some heroic person. They just want to bury their brother, and I think basic human decency would say that that's okay.
Right. Do we have? I think Elijah, I think that's really fear, and I think something that you bring up, I think is interesting, is do we see in Creon an attempt to be overly punitive as far as family is concerned, so that the city doesn't think that he's just doing favors for his family, that he's not taking, that he wants to come across to the rest of the city as absolutely and completely fair, and that even if a member of my own family goes against this decree, then that person will suffer the full extent of the law. Is he going overboard in this because he fears that otherwise that he will be accused of favoritism or not dealing justly with members of his family as opposed to what would be the normal, citizen?
I think that definitely could be a fear because, again, I don't see any other way to why you would not support your family. But I feel like also that he wants to be seen as this just person because back in like when you look even at Oedipus, even though like at first he was seen as like heavily venerated and stuff like that, in the end because of his actions, people thought that like he was a bad person. Even he thought that about himself. So I felt like he did want to serve the city of Thebes in a just way, even to the point of punishing family members and not show any type of favoritism, but to just show support for the city.
Yeah. Somebody had a comment over here. Was it Remise? Was it you?
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna bring up, Davis was talking about Creon and, like, his family being dead. And I don't know if I'm just imagining it, but I think it's that Haimon, however you say it, was, like, Creon's only remaining son or something. Am I making this up? And so I was guessing maybe his other sons were killed by Polynices in the war. So that might be like another dimension of like why he doesn't want Polynices to be honored or buried. And I don't know if like there's some other reason where his children died, but that's what I thought might have happened.
Yes, we do learn that he had another son who is dead, and so Haimon is his last surviving son.
But did the other son? Do we know if he died in this civil war, or is that sort of?
Well, okay, so the traditional narrative suggests that they sacrificed him in order to have the gods' favor against the Argives.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
It's classic Greek father-son relationship.
That's right. Somewhat like Iphigenia,
Yeah.
something like that is going on. Okay.
Was it do we know like if it was Creon like the Agamemnon of that story, or was it?
That I don't know, but it could well be something I should look into that. Yeah.
I think after being directly responsible for one of his relatives, he wouldn't want to just keep doing it.
Right. So Elijah reminds us that that when Oedipus was faced with this problem, that he also took a very strong position to his disadvantage, and Creon is taking a similarly strong position. Are there other parallels with what we see in the behavior of these? Yeah, go ahead.
This is kind of the opposite of parallel, but I mean, for me at least, Oedipus, the gods were like, hey, you're gonna do this, you don't get a say, and then he did it, and then was, struck down. And then Creon, I mean, as far as I know, there wasn't a prophecy that ended in you're gonna cause the death of your remaining son and one of your remaining nieces, like, and I guess that makes him more tragic, knowing that at least Oedipus had the fallback of it was fate, it was destiny, I couldn't avoid this. Whereas Creon, at the end of the day, has to be like, oh, that's all me. Like, no one made me do this. I wasn't fated to do this. This was purely the result of my own fear and happiness.
Let's look in Oedipus at Colonus and see what Oedipus has to say about Creon.
It's not good things.
would it be about when Creon tries to take him?
Because remember what Creon did, right? He tried to
The girls.
get Oedipus to
Yeah.
come back to Thebes. Not that Oedipus would be buried in Thebes, he would have to be buried outside, so it's not really kind of a false, please come home. Not really totally home, but close to home, okay, so that you can protect us. And then Creon abducts the daughters, right, in an attempt to force Oedipus to do something, right? And then Oedipus responds when they're reunited. What does he say?
As for my sons, they'll both inherit Theban soil just enough to cover their corpses.
Mhm.
Oh.
So that's his curse against his sons, right?
I will not let the spirits here witness my curse, you scum. I've been blinded for so long, and you've stolen from me the last light of my life. My own dear eyes. Let the eternal eye itself, the blazing sun in the sky, inflict an old age on you just like mine.
Mhm. Where are you?
That was line 865.
Yep.
And Creon just had taken. He gets it.
Inflict an old age on you just like mine. And what is Oedipus's old age here? He is there. He himself is blind, but he's lost Iocaste, he's lost his wife, he's lost his standing in the society. So there is a curse operative. But I think Drew's point is well taken, that in Oedipus we see the apparatus of fate exerting a very, very strong influence on what's going on here. And Creon seems to be making mistakes or inviting nemesis of his own, in his own capacity of that. Right? So I think that's a really important contrast, Drew. Thank you. But let's look at some other parallels between Oedipus's behavior and Creon's behavior under these circumstances.
Their wives to suicide.
Right, but that's later
Right.
in the play.
That's like not
But remember at the beginning, so Oedipus is responding to a plague. Creon is responding to civil war. Creon has made this decree. Tiresias comes. What about his view of Tiresias?
It's like gonna.
What does he accuse Tiresias of? Yeah, that he's motivated. And what does he accuse the guard of? What does he think's going on here? That it's all about money, right? It's all about wealth. It's all about getting money, and that money is responsible for what's happened to the body of Polynices. They've been bribed. And then Tiresias, it's all about you just want to do these things to drum up business, right? It's all about your resource, it's all about wealth. Okay, so we have this streak of paranoia that is, that people are after him, and that wealthy people or somebody is providing resources to destabilize Creon, right? Yeah, go ahead, Bernice.
Yeah, like in the Oedipus play, there's this like scene where Oedipus really comes after Creon for trying to help him, and like I think there's like a mirrored sort of scene, or I guess Oedipus is a mirror of this, where Creon is sort of really attacking like his children and Tiresias, like in the same way that Oedipus attacks him, even though they're just trying to help him, right?
I mean, I was gonna make that parallel too. I feel like there's a lot of similarities between Antigone and Tyrannus. Just like it kind of like allows me to think like, well, maybe these like 3 plays, if you just think about Creon's character, it's how he goes from like this very sane, like definitely not guilty and almost like the victim in the first one, to like power hungry and like just like Oedipus by the end, and very like tyrannical and paranoid. And then he ends up, it's like the same, and so he ends up doing the same thing that happened to Oedipus, except he just dies as opposed to, and whereas Oedipus goes from like, he has this tragedy, but at least he dies in the way that like he chose, or Creon, it's just, it's like his tragic story of like how he goes from like the victim to the issue.
I don't think it's fair to call him well, I don't know. At least I don't want to call him a villain, because I see what's going on. It's not, like, he messed up, but like, I don't think he messed up that.
I wasn't calling him a victim, but it's the he has like a tragic flaw.
Right.
Which develops.
Creon, yeah. I mean, like he screwed up, and like I get that like bad things are like gonna happen to him, but like I sort of like I'm still like struck by how quickly like and unfortunate it is, like lock up and then like 2 hours later your son's committed suicide because he was, I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, if you read Antigone with having like read Oedipus and Clonus, I think Creon is a villain, because it's like almost a villainous scene out of a Disney movie. He rolls up to like a forest grove and kidnaps a blind guy's daughters.
Yeah, that's right.
And then the guards are like, "Hey, you can't do that." He's like, "I'm the king of a different land. You can't stop me." And I mean, that's literally
Doesn't sound like a Disney villain.
a scene out of a Disney villain.
Okay, that's true. Yeah.
And then
Pretty
they're like,
bad.
"Hey, you can't do that." And he's like, "I'll start a war. I'm gonna kidnap these kids." And even they're like trying to explain like, "Hey, why do you think you can just roll up and like kidnap kids from a different kingdom?" He's like, "Because I'm Creon." They're like, "What?"
Okay.
Because I was just reading through this passage again, and he literally he comes and tries to trick Oedipus into coming back to Thebes, and Oedipus is like, "I don't know that you come to me pretending you're gonna help me, but you're gonna like let me just die outside of Thebes, like, and then I refuse your help." And you went, "Well, guess I gotta kidnap your kids." Like,
Hey, you asked nicely the first time.
he didn't even really ask nicely the first time.
Comparatively.
Yeah.
I mean, compared to stealing your kids, like everything's nice.
Yeah, maybe he is a bad dude after all. I'll take that.
Well, I think that this is a really interesting observation. If it were anybody else, right? If it were just somebody, a henchman from a thug maybe from Thebes rolling up like a Disney villain, that would be, the accomplices in 101 Dalmatians or whatever. Okay, that would be one thing. But there are issues between the family of Creon and the family of Oedipus, aren't there? I think that there is real antipathy here. That Creon, Antigone is his potential daughter-in-law, and he comes down on her harder than anybody else. I think that if we just look at it, okay, so Creon, as Creon claims in Oedipus at Tyrannus, right, that he was responsible for elevating Oedipus to rule as Tyrannus, right? And what does it get him? It gets him accusations of wanting to overthrow Oedipus. He is accused of plotting against him. He's accused of all these things, and then to top it all off, Oedipus, as it turns out, is the person that killed his brother-in-law, right? Okay. And is now responsible ultimately for the death of his sister, Jocasta, right? I'm just thinking that Creon might have some real antipathy. I mean, he might have a real problem with this family, right? Okay, and that I don't, you know, that he, in taking Antigone and trying to abduct Antigone and Ismene to try to get Oedipus back, I do think that I think we've got some latent hostility, anger, resentment that is coming out of Creon at this point that he may or may not be aware of. That I think he's, I mean, to me, the only way I can explain how he responds to Antigone is that he now hates this family. He sees that his fates are so intertwined with this family that is so dysfunctional and so problematic and so ill-fated that I think that what is coming out of this is some real antipathy, some real hatred, and wanting to be rid of them at all costs in some way that minimizes risk to himself. And that maybe he intentionally made this decree knowing that someone like Antigone and Ismene might well in fact try to do it, and that would give him a cause to get rid of them. I think that Creon is, I think that he is deeply, that he is very troubled, okay, shall we say this, by this family, right? He's seen he's seen, I mean, Eteocles is the younger son who usurps the throne from, so Eteocles is in fact a tyrannos, right? Okay, in the strict sense of the word, and Creon is serving this tyrannos. He served one tyrannos, his father, Oedipus. He served another tyrannos as his son, and then he's got, then another one tried to usurp it, brought civil war to his society, and then the daughter of the one tyrannos is going to marry his son. I'm just thinking that he is really upset by this, and that his responses are those of someone with true and deep-seated antipathy towards his family. I can only understand it that way, and it's only when he sees that this antipathy has led to decisions that are going to deeply affect him and bring even more disaster his way that he relents. Yeah, Drew.
I think he's also, I mean, he's very selfish, because I think I agree with like the antipathy thing, but it almost seems like he was using his newfound position of power to just like play out this revenge fantasy he has against Oedipus's family. Making objectively bad decisions for Thebes, as long as they would just screw over Oedipus or his descendants. Like, he was willing to start a war with Athens. If he had, would starting a war with Theseus equate to starting a war with basically all of Athens? Because it was like a Argos or whatever was a team.
Right. So Argos is definitely marching against Theseus. Athens. I think that Theseus. It's hard to say. I mean, well, look, wars. Things cause wars that are sometimes very trivial. Okay, and they represent often a pretext for underlying conflict and issues. So would this have caused a war? Who knows? I mean, maybe there were. I mean, it could have been the cause of something, but I do think that it's something. So just to sort of recap some of the things we're looking at. Elijah has identified the notion of fear, that when, up until this point, Creon has been able to sort of, work from the margins, if you will, of power, right? He's been close to power. In fact, in Oedipus Tyrannos, he says, look, I've got the best possible situation at all. I enjoy all the benefits of power, right? But none of the consequences, none of the downside, right? Okay, well now he's got the downside too, right? So that the fear, having seen it from these different things, being afraid of doing the wrong thing or trying to overcompensate for the mistakes that have happened in the past, I think is something that certainly animates his behavior. I absolutely agree with this. as I've suggested, that there's probably some deep-seated antipathy towards this family. I mean, it is a family that has caused him great pain. It's resulted in the death of his brother-in-law, of his sister. It has led to civil war. I mean, this character, he has to, I think he recognizes that there is something awesome and awful in a religious kind of sense about Oedipus, that this Oedipus is something truly, for good or bad, is something of huge consequence. But the others, I think that his attitude toward them is not nearly as deferential or reverential as it was towards Oedipus. So there's some deep-seated animosity there. But so what else? What else about that? Yeah, Drew.
I was just saying, he let the animosity like cloud his judgment as like a ruler. Like he just would do bad things for Thebes, as long as he could like kidnap a kid or lock someone in a cave, as long as they were related to Oedipus.
I mean, I think that this is that we see this, getting back to what is Spencer, and I want to I want to nip the tragic flaw in the bud here, but that are we talking about human nature, or is this something that is just germane to Creon? He's making mistakes, right? And the question is he prone to make these mistakes? Is there something about his character that is causing him to make these mistakes? Or do we see operating here sort of things that are more generally applicable to human nature? That is, that when one feels a threat, one strikes out against those and sometimes makes bad decisions. Decisions that we make out of fear, decisions that we make out of anger and antipathy, these are all human emotions that we all feel, and the question is that a flaw, or is that just human nature, and how we respond to that is significant. Yeah.
It wasn't Aristotle that wrote like about Greek tragedy, saying that there wasn't actually like a tragic flaw, but it's more like just the tragic mistake that happens.
Yeah, that people make mistakes,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
So I'd say that's definitely what Creon did, is like that tragic mistake for like going against his niece. I feel like that like led to his downfall, like everything, like knocked the dominoes down, that led to everything just like going to crap. But
do you think do we find ourselves, I mean, a situation where we make one mistake, and then that, in order to, rather than sort of saying, yeah, I made a mistake, okay, we cling to it to such an extent, okay, I'm sorry, build a wall, right?
yeah.
That we then cling to it so much that it sort of derails everything else, right? I said, no, Polynices is not going to be buried. That's it. And then all of these things happen in sequence after that are a consequence of an obdurance, that the unwillingness to bend on, even though there's lots of references in this to things that are inflexible, right? And inflexibility leads to disaster, right? I'm sorry for that political comment, but I'm reading this and I'm thinking, wow, this dogged desire to cling to something at all costs, that even though it can prove disastrous in the long run, is something that I think that we can see operating in this. Yeah, Davis.
I just think it's notable to recognize the differences between Creon's circumstances and Oedipus's circumstances, because for me, the most important part of Oedipus Tyrannus is that his actions are all fated, and we talked about this just a minute ago, but the tragedy in Oedipus is different because there's literally no escape. And it's that inevitability of fate which should scare you. But in Antigone, I think, yeah, Creon makes mistakes that lead to his downfall, but you know, there's no prophecy that says like that should happen to him. And we do get to see his progression through all three of the plays to where he gets to this point, and so I don't think there's anyone to blame except for himself. And the fact that he receives counsel in this play in particular about like literally stop, like don't do this, and he just continues to say, no, I am right, this is exactly what I need to do, and then it, you know, that's his tragic fall. But the fact that he ignores that is literally like all his own fault. So I think, I'm not sure why, like what to take away from it necessarily, as far as like in Oedipus, it's like fate is inescapable, and in Antigone, I don't know, listen to people, like that's pretty lame. But there's obviously something like that that is very different from Oedipus Rex that is, it changes like the whole feeling behind his fall.
Yeah, Elijah.
I would have to also do a comment on that, because I believe that the aspect of fate in the story of Oedipus was definitely a big factor. And for like Oedipus, he tried to, like he heard this fate and he knew this fate was bad. So he tried to do his best to do what was right and go against this negative fate, not knowing that in doing that, he was actually making this fate come true. However, for Creon, there was nothing that said, hey, this thing is going to happen. So it was all his choice. And these bad things came because it was his choice to do what he did. So it was mentioned earlier, like these bad things happened very quickly for him. But for like Oedipus, it was like over a long time where he had did these negative things, like decades. However, again, he was trying to escape this fate. So his motive in general was a pretty noble motive to say, hey, I want to not have this evil thing happen. So I'm going to do this in order to keep this evil thing from happening. I don't think Creon was like, I don't want anything evil to happen. He was just like, as you mentioned, he didn't like the family, so his motives came just out of anger. It can even be argued that it was not even as much about the city, but about him and his anger towards the family, including his fear towards being a leader, and not necessarily a noble motive in what he did, just more so of, I don't like what's been going on. I don't like his family. I'm going to show my anger towards him.
Right. Yes, we had some other hands over here. Yeah.
Yeah, at the end of like Oedipus Tyrannus, you feel bad for Oedipus, because you're like, oh, I mean, at least in the Greek mind, he did not really have control over what was going to happen. So, I mean, I don't know if that absolves him of blame, but it at least alleviates the blame on him. Because like it was, at least in this culture, it would have been the gods doing that. All this occurred, it was inevitable. And then after you read Antigone and you see all the hardship and like trial Creon's face, you're like, oh, those are the consequences of your own actions. Like, you did this to yourself. And it starts pretty quick too. Like, from the time Oedipus falls to Antigone's death, like how long of a time frame is that?
So
like from the time Oedipus like climbs himself to like Antigone's death, about how long is that?
I thought he was in Colonus for a while. Like,
I don't know, some indefinite, fairly lengthy period of time, at least so it seems, that Oedipus, was there sort of detained in Thebes for some time, and then ultimately driven into exile, probably by his sons, right? Because his sons feared their hold on power as long as his father was still in town, right? And so then he goes off and he's wandering around for some time, and then eventually makes it to Athens. So I do think that there's some period of time, but again, sort of time in this world of mythos, of these traditional narratives, is when do we first get a sense? I want you to put yourself in Creon's shoes here, right? When do you first, so if we're thinking, so let's imagine this, that we want to find, and because I think, you've sort of, several of you mentioned that, what am I supposed to take away from this play? What is the lesson here? If I think of Greek tragedy as it was, as kind of the class session for inculcating or promoting certain civic values, right? What am I supposed to take away from reading this play? I've got several questions I want to pose, but let's start with this one. What am I supposed to take away? What is the first indicator that something might, if you was a ruler, okay, and you want to say, okay, I want to learn from Creon's situation here. What do you think is the first indicator that something is not quite, perhaps, as it should be in the kind of polis, in the kind of community you would want to be, that you would want to lead? Yeah, Drew.
I think the very, very first thing is it's in Oedipus at Colonus, around like line 765. It's Oedipus talking about how Creon will present something to you as him doing a favor to you, or him helping you, but it's him serving his own interests.
So where is that in Oedipus of Colonus?
Line 765.
Okay.
Oedipus is talking about how he was pleading with Creon to exile him, like after all of that went down, and Creon refused to. And then Oedipus says he started to get comfortable in seclusion at home, and then as soon as that happened, Creon banished him.
Right.
With nothing, and then he finally hobbled his way to Athens, and then Creon found him in Athens and was harassing him there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think probably around the time he was starting to just it seems like he was just messing with Oedipus at that point. Like, he refused exile, and then he got comfortable, so he exiled.
So is the lesson there that you feel like, if we're Creon and we're looking at these events and we're saying, what can I learn from that? Do you think that the lesson for Creon there is to not be quite as hesitant, to be more direct, to be more, because Oedipus wanted to go into exile as he had decreed, the person who kills Laius, when we find out who this person is, he has to go into exile. Creon says, well, now wait a minute, we should consult the gods and find out what's going on, and it takes time, and then eventually Oedipus, his anger and his self-loathing sort of abate, and he feels like he could probably stay in, but then Creon says, no, now you've got to go. So is the lesson there for Creon, if we want to sort of develop ourselves as, if we want to take something away from this as a leader, that we need to be more decisive, that we need to, that we need to act. We can't be as hesitant. We can't let things sort of just carry on. We have to make a decision. I mean, that might explains why he is taking such a hard line and such an immediate line in the aftermath of the war, is that he's learned, the longer you let things kind of go without a firm decision, the more difficult things can be.
I think it's less the decisiveness, because that's, I don't know if I call it decisiveness later in Antigone, where he's just messing up. But I think it's more like, just a lot of his decisions are irrationally based, or emotional or anger based, and I think that's really might be a takeaway, especially in a society like the Greek one, where you're continually making emotional decisions. I could see how that in this culture they would really want to portray as a bad thing.
Yeah. Ramiz?
I think sort of a different tact is if you thought about it sort of I think the message is something like what Solon is trying says don't think you're above it, even though you've got all the things that you have. And one of my favorite passages was this translation did it weird, but numberless are the world's wonders, but none more wonderful than man. And that passage ends with, man has the means to handle every need. He never steps toward the future without the means. Except for death, he's got no relief from that, though he puts every mind to seeking cures for plagues that are hopeless. and that was like 360-ish.
Mhm.
And I thought, like, you know, I thought that combined with sort of what we know about Greek tragedy is, like, I think it really goes to illustrate that the lesson I took away was no one's above dying,
Mhm.
and tragedy is everywhere. It's like the tragedy of being human is you try your best to do the right thing, and because you're gonna miss the mark somehow, you know, don't expect that everything will turn out lolly-da, because it doesn't for anyone. It happened. And also, I'm not sure, like, if you can impose, like, the plays written after onto this play, but, like, it happened to Oedipus, and he had this terrible fate. Like, it happened to Pentheus, and, like, he was just trying to restore civic order. It happened to Creon, who, you know, very different from Oedipus in a lot of ways, but the same sort of fate ends up befalling all of these people. That's what I would say. So long.
Life gets complicated, then you die.
Yeah.
Essentially. Okay, good, good. Yeah.
I would say that kind of what's to be taken away, and the whole play is summed up with what the last thing the chorus says. Wisdom is supreme for a blessed life, and reverence for the gods must never cease. Great words sprung from arrogance are punished by great blows, so it is one learns in old age to be wise. And that's lines like 1348 to the end. And I think that just sums up what Creon was not. Like, he was not wise. He was not reverent to the gods. He was very arrogant, and it showed by his punishments. And then it talks about old age again, and how that's when it's learned to be wise. Because I think that both Oedipus and Creon learned both of those things in old age after the great blows.
Kind of like that king from Herodotus, who gets conquered by the Persians and then becomes like the advisor.
Croesus.
Croesus, yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing happens to him.
Yeah.
Great dude falls, and then he becomes wise as an advisor.
So I'm glad that you brought attention to this ode from Antigone that we saw in Brewer and Tellson's version of this in Oedipus and Colonus. Okay, well, when you read this, did the setting now in Antigone as opposed to Oedipus and Colonus, did that change when you read this? Did you see this? Did you respond to this ode differently?
Which ode? I'm sorry.
The one that you talked about, the many wonders. It's what's that?
Wait, did we hear it before somewhere?
Oh yes, it was in
Gospel of Colonus.
in the Gospel of Colonus. Yeah.
There's a lot going on in that play, but I guess I don't know. They're like Brewer and Tellson kind of changed the tone of the play because of the setting they place it in. It's very like revered. It's like a typical like Bible tale. It's like, and we know the significance of it because they place so much onto it, and like they have a preacher there literally to explain to you what's going on and why we should learn from this. But now we're like kind of slapped in the face with the meaning, and we're like, whoa, like that was pretty intense.
Yeah. Okay, so we're almost out of time for today. Thank you. Great discussion. I want to, so on Thursday, we're going to update our preparation for the performance. Alexis has been out of town, and so she's going to be back, and we've got to do a little organizing, and so I'll have an update for you, and I'll probably send an update via email before then. So what's happening on Thursday is we're going to take some time to look at that and the production aspect of it as we prepare for rehearsals this coming Friday and Sunday, and possibly on Saturday. I want you to consider three things, right? As we move forward on this, I want you to consider I want you to go back and look at the Gospel of Colonus and this ode, right, and see what's different. okay? What is different about the ode, not just the context, but the use of the ode itself, right, in these two settings, all right? So we're gonna consider that. 2, I want you to consider the fact that we have read these in order as far as the narratives were concerned, right? Okay, so we started with Oedipus the Tyrannus, and then Oedipus Clonus and Antigone. I want you to consider for a moment what it would be like to read these out, to experience these in the order of their productions, right? That Antigone comes first, and then Oedipus Tyrannus, and then Oedipus Clonus. You know, how does our approach to these plays, in other words, how do we know what comes before influence how we understand this play to operate, okay? And I think that's an important thing. This is partly because as we start to think about performative aspects of this, okay? I want you to, because, and one of the things that I want you to consider is we, in the world of, as we understand drama and as we experience drama, one of the things that we experience in our context that was not part of the Greek system, the Greek world to as great an extent, is the notion of actors themselves who inhabit roles, and then when they inhabit a different role, how we understand and view them, right? So you see what I'm getting at? We take, for example, I mean, okay, so this I don't know if you know these films, but take, for example, Apocalypse Now, this film by Francis Ford Coppola, and what happens when the character played by Marlon Brando enters, okay? Because we know Marlon Brando, right? I mean, Marlon Brando has this, you know, or when we see any actor who is associated with a particular identity or role in a different role, how do we respond to that? Do we bring with it our own understanding of the roles that this actor has played before into our understanding of what this actor is going to do in this situation? In other words, is our own dramatic world shaped by, you know, the roles that we have seen these actors play in before? Okay, this is a really interesting concept because, you know, actors get typecast, right, as a particular kind, and it's difficult for them to break out of that. And what does that suggest about how we understand human nature, right, and the expectations? And Elijah, you know, brought up issues about fate, and some of the others talked about fate too. About do we see it? Do we impose, to a certain extent, fate onto characters based on the roles that they have played before? Oh, you can't be a good guy. You are fated to be a bad guy. You're always going to be a bad guy, and because people impose upon them a certain sense of behavior. So that's something. Thing. Third thing I want you to think about is that this is one of the main topoi, or one of the big issues in this play is gender, right? And gender, because gender in the Athenian context, as we've talked about it, is an issue of essentially political rights, right? And do we see in this play is essentially, it's a play about oppression. It's about those who have political power and rights and their ability to impose their will on others who do not have the same rights. And this becomes an issue because Antigone has become a play that has great currency in times of political conflict, and as we will see in context that underscore the political inequities and injustices that happen within a society. And we're going to see this really come to life next week when we look at Antigone. So I want you to be thinking about those aspects as we move into the plays we discussed on Thursday. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Professor, do you have classes this afternoon?